Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of my Hu Tao guide. Here I will be explaining her playstyle and how to optimize it by looking at her skills, going over her overall damage output, and her frame data. But before we dive too deep into this, let's first start with a skills overview. First off, her normal and charged attacks. Her normal attack string is a 6-hit combo where the 5th hit will deal 2 hits. So overall, you're going to be dealing 7 hits in total. Her charge attack is a forward lunge very similar to Xiangling's, except that while she's in her E skill, this move will get special properties. E skill, the Guide to Afterlife, will allow Hu Tao to enter the Paramita Papilio state, in which she will gain increased attack depending on her max HP. Don't get this confused with her current HP, this is going to be a static value depending on your current build. The attack bonus gained this way cannot exceed 400% of her base attack, and will consume 30% of her current HP in order to activate it. All of her attack damage is going to be converted into pyro damage, which cannot be overridden by any other elemental infusion, for example Chongyun. Her charge attacks are going to apply the Blood Blossom effect against enemies that get hit by it. It also increases Hu Tao's resistance to interruption. Burst, a high-scaling, single-hit attack that does more damage if she's at or below 50% HP. She will also heal when she hits enemies, and depending on the amount of enemies she hits, she will trigger multiple heals up to a maximum of 5 times. Hu Tao's first passive will give her teammates 12% extra crit rate for 8 seconds after her E skill ends. Her second passive is going to give her extra pyro damage bonus, 33%, as long as Hu Tao's HP is at 50% or below it. And very briefly, going over her constellations, since this is a free-to-play guide after all, her first constellation is very strong. It might look weak just on the surface since it just makes her charge attacks not consume stamina, but I will explain why this is so strong later on. Her C2 is also really good because Blood Blossom is a pretty good source of damage, and enhancing the damage and allowing another source to apply it is going to be good. Next, let's go over Hu Tao's energy regeneration. So her E skill is a little bit weird because the activation is not going to give you any particles. It's once you start attacking where you will start generating particles. And each time that you do generate some particles, you're going to get somewhere between 2 to 3 and an overall of 4 to 6. This is because there are 2 portions where you will actually generate these particles. Within the first few attacks, once you activate the skill, and when the skill is about to end. So let me just give you some examples. If you activate your E skill and immediately start attacking, you will always gain particles within the first few attacks. I can even wait a couple seconds after activating my E skill, and you can see that attacking will generate us some particles. The next portion where you gain particles is when the skill is about to end. The skill lasts 9 seconds, so it's going to end at around the 7-second mark if you pay attention to the skill timer on the bottom part of your screen, and you can see that I generate some particles at around that time. So what exactly are the conditions for generating particles? It is not based on how many attacks you perform, because in this example you can clearly see that I'm not performing that many attacks, but I'm still generating particles. After doing some extensive testing on this, I kind of concluded that a certain amount of time must pass before more particles can be generated. This amount of time is about 6 seconds within each other. So generally, if you start attacking right as the E skill starts, the next time you can generate more particles is at around the 9-second mark. And if you don't attack right away, it's going to become very likely that you will not be able to generate a second set of particles. This theory is further supported because if I wait just a couple of seconds before I start attacking, I generate particles with my first hit, and then 6 seconds later, I can see that I am generating more particles. So this of course is just my own testing, so let me know down in the comments below if the elemental particles is also behaving the same way for you guys, and if you actually know the answer, then also let me know. And of course, elemental particles is a direct relation to elemental burst, and so that means if you have 0 energy recharge on your build, you're not going to have this skill available every time you use your E skill. Your E skill is only going to generate around 12 to 18 energy, which is only about 1/5 to 1/4 of the energy required for this skill. And of course, while Hu Tao is off field, her energy regeneration is significantly lowered, especially if the elements don't match. It's very very likely that you will not get your elemental burst every time you use your E skill. It's probably going to come up every other time you use it, but this could change depending on the type of enemies that you're attacking. If you're fighting big groups of enemies, then you'll be getting more energy regen, but if you're just fighting one enemy, then that's going to be significantly lowered. Alright, now let's talk about Hu Tao's playstyle. Her playstyle is pretty much centered around her E skill because her base attack is the lowest out of every character in this game. Yes, even 4 stars like Barbara. You basically don't want to attack with Hu Tao when you're not in your Paramita Papilio state because you're basically hitting your enemies with a wet noodle. But MiHoYo kind of took this into account because of her first passive skill. The crit rate buff lasts 8 seconds and is just about the same amount of time that Hu Tao will be in cooldown until her E skill comes back up. Her physical damage is going to be pretty bad, but if you have invested a lot into her, it's not going to look very bad. But if you just compare it to other characters with the same amount of investments, it's much lower, significantly lower. And so since you don't want to use Hu Tao outside of her E skill state, let's talk about the Paramita Papilio state. So the skill is going to last 9 seconds total, and your charge attacks are going to gain the Blood Blossom effect. The scaling on Blood Blossom is not that great. It's about half of your charge attack, but this damage is still extra damage, so it's really good. You'll want to apply it onto as many enemies as you can. Blood Blossom will last 8 seconds, and it ticks for damage every 4 seconds. And the way that the refresh works is that it will not overwrite the current Blood Blossom, rather it just extends the timer and the ticks will still just tick every 4 seconds. So for example, if you reapply Blood Blossom 6 seconds later, you will still get 3 ticks of damage. I've seen quite a few comments on the internet saying that if you want to be optimal with this, you want to apply it at the start and at the end of your E skill state, but since the actual duration of Blood Blossom is exactly 8 seconds and it ticks every 4 seconds, it's pretty much impossible to hit this right on its mark to get 4 ticks. So hitting 3 ticks is really what you want to aim for, so as long as you reapply it after 4 seconds of the first one, you're gonna be pretty good. The cooldown on our E skill also works completely different from Tartaglia's. The total cooldown is 16 seconds, but it begins to refresh as soon as you enter the state. So in my opinion, this is much better than Tartaglia's E skill. It's also kind of deceptive because this state actually lasts a little bit longer than 9 seconds because of a phenomenon called a hit lag. This is a whole nother topic, but it's just something that you should know. And this is great for us Hu Tao mains, so we really shouldn't be complaining about that. Hu Tao is also clearly designed to spam charge attacks. Her charge attacks is the highest scaling for all of the polearm users in the game. She's first, followed by Xiangling, then Zhao, and then Zhongli. It is quite surprising that Xiangling is actually second in this spot, but I think that it is pretty clear that since her charge attack is scaled so high, they really want you to use this move as much as you can. This is further supported because her C1 allows you to use charge attacks without any stamina consumption. And as we get into her frame data, you will see that spamming charge attacks is her best DPS rotation. Spamming charge attacks also allows us to apply Blood Blossom onto as many enemies as we can and also keep its uptime to its max. So the extra damage from Blood Blossom also just increases her overall DPS. And of course, once her E skill expires, you definitely want to switch off of Hu Tao and do your rotations with your other characters. Her second passive is going to give her 33% more pyro damage bonus, so in order to optimize Hu Tao's damage, we obviously want to stay at this level. You'll want to aim to keep Hu Tao at around 70% HP because popping her E skill when her HP is at this level is going to bring you down below 50%. As you're starting out just playing with Hu Tao, this might be difficult to manage, so for now you can kind of just consider this as a nice bonus. Playing her optimally is gonna require you to know your burst healing numbers so you don't accidentally overheal yourself and get overall less damage. If you do accidentally overheal yourself or don't enter the Paramita Papilio state under 50% HP, you might want to intentionally get hit. And this might be why they gave Hu Tao extra interruption resistance so that your DPS rotations don't get interrupted while you intentionally take damage. Hu Tao's damage output is very good, but it's going to depend very much on your HP. You're going to have to build her HP. There is no going around that for this character. Without enough, you're seriously hurting her DPS. But with a single 5-star HP Sans artifact piece at plus 16, she can easily get the highest attack stat of all characters when her E skill is popped. If we don't include any amount of substats, her HP can get around 22,000 with just a plus 16 5-star artifact. Comparatively to other characters that is using the same amount of investment, she is going to have the highest attack, hands down. An HP Sans artifact is only one way to get HP. Take this comparison for example. A level 70 Xiao that has plus 16 artifacts for the feather, giving him flat attack, and a plus 16 artifact Sans with attack percent, he's only going to reach 1,359 attack. However, on the other hand, if Hu Tao is using a plus 16 HP percent Sans artifact and a plus 16 HP on her flower, she is going to be able to reach 2,071 attack at level 70. This math was of course done without any substat consideration and when they both hold a 4-star weapon with 510 base attack. That is quite the difference. And so at this level, she does pretty reliable damage. For an entire rotation of her E skill, which is around 9 seconds, she can deal 80,000 damage to a single target. And this is without her burst and without any elemental reactions. If you've got crazy substats that is raising your HP by a lot, then you can consider using Elemental Mastery instead and really boost the power of your elemental reactions. So now let's finally dive into Hu Tao's frame data. Her E skill activation is about 32 frames, which is about half a second. That's pretty much all you need to know for that. And then next, her full 6-hit attack string will take about 3.5 seconds if you dash cancel it. You can do about 3 full rotations of this with 1 cycle of your E skill, so use that to remember when your E skill is about to wear off. Next, I looked into her charge attack frame data. I looked into the frame data when you jump cancel it, when you dash cancel it, and when you don't cancel it at all. So first off, dash canceling is the fastest, but only marginally. It also completely eats through your stamina, and because of this, you can only perform about 5 of them before running out, leaving you with about 2.5 seconds left on your E skill. Jump canceling is pretty fast if you can cancel your charge attack with frame perfection. You can get anywhere between 80 frames and 66 frames with jump canceling, depending on whether or not you jump too late or not. Lastly, no canceling at all is probably going to be your most reliable way of spamming charge attacks. Without canceling, you can execute consecutive charge attacks every 66 to 68 frames. Those 2 frames are pretty much negligible, and this clocks in at about 1 second or 1.15 if you want to be precise. Compared to dash canceling and jump canceling, you can't really make mistakes doing it this way. Spamming charge attacks is by far her highest damaging combo. It's also got better AoE than just single strikes. You'll also be able to fit in about 8 of these within 1 rotation. You just need to be aware that if you spam it too much, you could end up far away from enemies, and walking back to them or dashing back to them is going to eat up your DPS time and your stamina. I did calculate this frame data by myself, so I may be off by a couple of frames, but for the most part, I think it's pretty accurate. Aside from spamming her charged attacks, her best auto attack combo is going to be 3 normal attacks into a charged attack. So just make sure to use the right combo in the right situations. One such example is to use your charge attack spam against immobilized enemies. Use your 3 normal attacks into charge attack as your main bread and butter for enemies that are more spread out. And use jump canceling if you want to keep your positioning instead of charging attack too far away from all of the enemies. This especially happens when you're surrounded. So just try your best to be aware of your current situation. Alright guys, this is pretty much the end of the video. Stick around for more Hu Tao content. I will be going over her optimal artifact sets, her best weapons, and some other specific Hu Tao tips. Hopefully this playstyle guide helped you out and you learned something new. If you've stuck around for this long, I sincerely thank you. And if you did learn something new, please leave me a like and also a comment. Until next time guys, I will see you later.